Hello, and welcome to the Folklore and Fiction podcast. My name is Kelly MacCath-Moran. I'm a PhD candidate in the Folklore Department at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and I'm also a speculative fiction writer under the pseudonym C.S. MacCath. The Folklore and Fiction podcast and dispatch synthesize these passions with a focus on folklore scholarship aimed at storytellers. You'll find the Folklore and Fiction archive along with the rest of my work online at folkloreandfiction.com. Interested listeners will find a link to the current dispatch in the show notes, where a more comprehensive record of this episode can be found, including a bibliography and other references. This edition is a departure from my promised two-part discussion of language and verbal lore, which will be condensed and presented in a single edition next month. Instead, I'm answering the call of folklore scholar Phillips Stevens Jr., who argues that folklorists are uniquely qualified to address harmful collective narratives, and because of this, they have a, quote, professional and moral responsibility to share their knowledge, end quote. I'm also following the lead of Timothy Tangherlini and his fellow scholars, who write that, quote, people are making real-world and at times violent or dangerous decisions based on informal stories that circulate on and across their social networks, and that conspiracy theories are a significant part of that storytelling, end quote. With these arguments in mind, I'll endeavor to provide you with an accessible introduction to narrative scholarship on the topic of conspiracy theories, and summarize my discussion with a list of questions you can use to evaluate the trustworthiness of narratives you encounter online and elsewhere. Defining the term conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories are narratives with a number of important elements, and in my research of the topic, I discovered that the definitions applied to them by scholars tend to focus on just a few of these at a time. However, I think it's important to provide you with a broad definition here, so I'll begin by contextualizing the partial definitions I found and end with a composite. Let's start in a place you might not expect: contemporary legends. Diane Goldstein writes that no matter how they are circulated, contemporary legends are, quote, told as true, factual, or plausible, and therefore assume a level of authority. They provoke dialogue about the narrative events, their interpretation, and their plausibility. They both articulate and influence beliefs and attitudes toward the subject matter, and they have the capability of affecting the actions and behavior of the listening audience, end quote. Contemporary legends and conspiracy theories are closely related from a narrative perspective, and I would argue that Goldstein's description suits them both. In fact, Gail DeVos discusses several contemporary conspiracy theories in her book on urban legends, where she also condenses David Aronovich's discussion of the topic, writing that, quote, conspiracy theory, defined by Aronovich, is the attribution of deliberate agency to something that is more likely to be accidental or unintended. He claims that this belief in conspiracy theories is harmful, distorting people's view of history, the present, and the possible future. The phenomenon of conspiracism, however, cannot be explained entirely by unequal power relations, the abundance or scarcity of information, or disenfranchisement. The ongoing attractiveness of conspiracy theory appears to be the human compulsion to create story, particularly story that either represents the way we think things should happen or is the best explanation we can get of why they didn't. Paradoxically, conspiracy theories are reassuring, suggesting that there is an explanation, that human agencies are powerful, and that there is order rather than chaos, end quote. This attribution of agency is important and needs a bit more nuance. Peter Knight writes that, quote, a conspiracy theory blames the current undesirable state of affairs on a concerted conspiracy by a secret group. It is, in effect, an interpretation of history that claims that things aren't always what they seem, and that things haven't just tumbled out by coincidence and the normal, more or less random fashion, but that they've only got like this because someone... This episode of the Folklore and Fiction podcast is a preview, and you can listen to the full episode on the Folklore and Fiction website. Just click on the dispatch link in the show notes or go to folkloreandfiction.com and sign up for a free account. Thanks very much for your interest. Copyright 2019 to 2023. Kelly S. MacCath-Moran. All rights reserved unless Creative Commons licensing is specifically applied.